Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you for organising this Festschrift. And it's a great privilege and honour to celebrate Hatem's wonderful career. I'd also like to thank all the visitors who've come, all the speakers, in particular some of our distinguished colleagues who speak in this first session, our interstate visitors and other colleagues. So I always like to think of Hatem as a physician-scientist, and I'm going to give my perspective of Hatem's career with some help from background information from colleagues who have given me permission to show the following photographs. And Hatem, you can rest easy. I could not find any compromising photos of you in any of the many photographs that were made available to us. However, I cannot say the same for some of your colleagues. Okay, so Hatem always lied about his age, but I actually found in his CV that he was actually born in 1951 in Egypt. And his father was a professor of medicine, a very distinguished physician-scientist in his own right. When his father, I think, had to retire in his 60s, the family moved to Iraq, where Hatem's father became a professor of medicine at the University of Mosul. Hatem went to high school in Iraq and then did his MBBS at the University of Mosul in Iraq. And the Iraqi medical system, they used to get external examiners to come and examine their final year medical students. And Hatem was obviously such a distinguished medical student that the external examiner, Dr. Alex Payton, who was a gastroenterologist from Birmingham, was so impressed by Hatem that he offered him an internship in the UK, which was really his door to his academic career. He went to Birmingham to do his intern and then second year, and I think it was in Birmingham he made his greatest discovery, that was Frances, his wife. And Hatem took 18 months to convince her to marry him, but that was his important work during that time. But he also got his fellowship with the College of Physicians. He moved and did his registrar year in North Middlesex Hospital, and he came up against at that stage what many people found was that there's a 20-year training consultancy in the UK system, which is one of hierarchy. The great Barry Firkin advertised a job as a senior tutor in medicine at the Alfred Hospital, and based on a reference from Alex Payton, who has continued to be a great mentor to Hatem, Barry took Hatem at the Alfred, and Hatem moved to Australia. He arrived at the Alfred in 1978, I think he was paid a very low salary and hence started his career of moonlighting, doing clinical work. I think he drove a radio taxi and used to drive around and do GP visits all over Melbourne. It still didn't teach you to get a decent car though, Hatem. He's still driving that same car from 30 years ago. He started to do some clinical and research work. He got his College of Physicians and College of Pathologists. He got his MD. And after only 3 years, I think Barry said, you need to go somewhere else. And I think that must have been a shock because it would have been a real struggle to actually move somewhere else. And Barry identified that Phil Maduris, who was a very distinguished physician-scientist at St Louis, and he went to St Louis to do his postdoctoral fellowships. This is a very fuzzy picture of Hatem. It's the only one we can get of Hatem at the bench. I think that says something, Hatem. We did a lot of work to try and find pictures of you at the bench, and this is the only one, and there is some question whether this is actually you. The archives have dated this to 1977, but we're not sure. This is a better photo, which is of Mark Aldridge, Hatem, and Barry Firkin. And you can see the young Hatem there dressed clinically. And this is a great photo. On the far left is Martin van der Weyden. Harvey Newnham's there. Hatem's just behind several of our colleagues who I think are in the audience. And I think one of the features of Barry's unit, which I think Hatem took on to great enthusiasm, was the role of the translation from the bedside to the bench, examining the patient, looking to see what was going on and then investigating it, which was a wonderful unit that Barry set up and that was ably led by Martin van der Weyden and then in turn Hatem contributed consistently to this clinically led research. In Hatem's postdoctoral years, I think he did some of his best scientist, and he transformed from really an observationist to someone who was really doing hardcore science. He did some wonderful work. He discovered a whole new coagulation system, which was the anticoagulation system. He purified thrombomodulin and the activations of protein C, which was a wonderful achievement which has been highly cited and I think is a lasting monument to his scientific excellence. Here's a picture of Hatem with Phil Maduris. Can you recognise Hatem in the photo? Phil Maduris is still almost going today doing research, and I ended up going and doing my postdoc with him as well. He came back in 1984, started as a senior lecturer and assistant physician, and set up his own lab. And he had a stellar cast of PhD students at the time, although he didn't treat us like we were stellar. He had an irreverent style, which was basically to, I guess, encourage us by making fun of us. But whatever he did, it worked because we've all stayed in science. He had a whole stack of other people wandering through the lab. I remember Sharon Lewin came and was wandering through the lab, and Suzanne Crowe and all the many of the professors here would have spent some time, whether it's a vacation scholar or a PhD or honours, in the lab with Hatem. And I think one of Hatem's great distinguishing features is somehow he's made science accessible to people who never thought they were doing science. Steve James, now Professor of Medicine and head of the Alfred, Paul Coggins, Professor and head of Haematology, Sean Jackson, Professor and Australia Fellow, we all did PhDs at Hatem. Phil Bird, he recruited as a fellow, he's now Professor of Biochemistry. Rob Metcalf, he recruited as a fellow, he's now Professor of Medicine at Monash. Simone, who's a fellow scientist. Herschel Nanker, who he's helped mentor, who was my postdoc, is now Professor and head of Haematology at St Vincent's. So I think, to my mind, Hatem's legacy is the people he's trained, and he's transformed, people like me who thought, I'd never go in a lab, to being physician scientist, which I think is a great legacy. So this is my classic picture of Hatem, which was taken in 1989, and I always think of Hatem like this. You want to talk to him, he's on the phone, he's looking pensive, and he's managing to juggle both science, medicine, and a huge administrative load simultaneously. This was the labs we all did our PhDs in, and they were incredibly productive. So I always feel like showing this photo when people come and say to me the labs are too crowded or they're not good enough. I think you can do great science in less than great environment. And I think Hatem's lab did do great science. And also it was a fun place. You will notice that he got on very well with his lab, despite he's having a go at us. You recognise Professor Jane and Professor Coughlin. And there was a lot of irreverent humour, which would have shocked some members, but cheered other people up. And there were good times and bad times. So I went off to do my postdoc, and when I came back in 2009, Hatem said, we're leaving the Alfred, we're going to Box Hill. And I said, are you mad? You can go by yourself. But somehow Hatem convinced all of us to go out to Box Hill. And at the time, I thought I was younger than Hatem, but I thought Hatem was, ready to be a professor. But he was really only 36 years old when he became a full professor and head of department, which is a wonderful achievement. And he did an enormous amount of great work at Box Hill. He established the first department of medicine, he restructured the teaching program, he did clinical work, he recruited many of the people in this audience to Box Hill and then recruited them all back to the Alfred again. He really built an academic unit in basically a community hospital. And then subsequently, when he came back to the Alfred, and others will speak about that, he developed the Australian Centre for Blood Diseases, and then linked all of haematology, many units together. So that's my vision of Hatem. You will hear from others, their particular perspective. Sean will talk on the Australian Centre for Blood Diseases, and others will talk on Hatem's wonderful achievements. So congratulations, Hatem. I'm hoping you'll never retire. You keep telling me you will and are, but I think you've got many wonderful, productive years ahead of you. So it's my great privilege now to move on to our first session, and I think we have three living legends with us who have transformed Australian medical research and science. Our first speaker, and we're very grateful for all speakers to come in to speak, is Sir Gustav Nossel, who has had an absolutely stellar career that continues. He joined the Macfarlane Burnet and became after Macfarlane Burnet became head of the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute at the age of 35. He has undertaken fundamental work in immunology, in particular in the area of antibody formation and immune tolerance. He has written 5 books and 530 scientific articles. Hatem, based on your CV, I think you've only written 150, so... Gus, you are a legend. He has been, he was head of the Walter and Eliza Hall for over 30 years. He's been chairman of the WHO Organising Committee on Vaccines. He was knighted in 1977. He was named Australian of the Year in 2000. He was on a postage stamp in 2002. He's had a high school named after himself. And perhaps I would like to think of one of my favourite of his awards. In 2012, he was awarded the Monash University Faculty of Medicine and Nursing and Health Sciences Lifetime Achievement Award. So thank you so much, Gus.